Welcome back to Courtroom Conversations right here on the Classic Courtroom YouTube channel.
Hi, everyone.
If you haven't already, please do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the most fascinating legal cases and controversies.
That's right.
I'm Dylan Brose Hamilton.
And I'm Susan Kelly Ashford.
And we are ready to dive in. Today, a case that has the whole country talking. A case that's raising some fundamental questions about justice power and the very nature of presidential pardons.
This is a big one.
President Biden's pardon of his son, Hunter Biden.
It's certainly a unique situation. I mean, presidential pardons have always been a part of our legal system.
Right.
But this one has sparked a level of debate and scrutiny that we haven't seen in quite some time.
Absolutely. We're talking about a preemptive pardon covering potential federal crimes over a 10-year period from 2014 to 2024. This isn't just a pardon for a specific act.
Right.
It's a pardon for a period of time.
It's a big period, too.
And that period, as many of you know, includes Hunter Biden's controversial involvement with Burisma Holdings, the Ukrainian gas company.
You're right to highlight that time frame. That's precisely what's fueling so much of the debate. It almost feels like we're stepping into uncharted legal territory here. To really understand the gravity of this situation, I think it's helpful to look back at the historical context of presidential pardons in the United States.
Okay, let's unpack that. For our viewers who might not be constitutional law scholars, can you give us a quick rundown of the history and evolution of presidential pardons?
Of course. The power to pardon is enshrined in Article 2 of the Constitution, granting the president the authority to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States except in cases of impeachment. This power was intended as a check on the judiciary, allowing the president to temper the sometimes rigid application of the law with compassion and mercy.
So it's a way to ensure that justice isn't just about punishment, but also about fairness and second chances.
Precisely. The Founding Fathers envisioned a system where the president could step in and right potential wrongs, offering clemency in cases where the punishment might be deemed excessive or where extenuating circumstances weren't fully considered during a trial.
It's a fascinating concept, this idea of a single individual having the power to essentially override the judicial system.
It's a lot of power.
But it also seems like a power that could be easily abused. Has that happened in the past?
Throughout history, there have been numerous instances where presidential pardons have sparked controversy. Some argue that President Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon for any crimes he might have committed related to the Watergate scandal set a dangerous precedent, potentially shielding a president from accountability.
That's a parallel a lot of people are drawing right now, comparing the scope of the Hunter Biden pardon to the Nixon pardon. But what makes the Hunter Biden pardon particularly unique, legally speaking?
Well, as you mentioned, it's preemptive, covering a specific time frame rather than specific crimes. This raises questions about whether a president can effectively grant immunity for potential future acts. The Constitution doesn't explicitly address this, and there's limited legal precedent to guide us.
It's almost like we're entering a legal gray area, testing the boundaries of presidential power in a way we haven't seen before.
That's a great way to put it. And it's this lack of clarity, this venturing into uncharted legal territory, that's making this pardon so controversial. It forces us to confront some fundamental questions about the balance of power, the role of the presidency, and the very nature of justice in a democratic society.
It's definitely a lot to grapple with, and I'm sure our viewers have a lot of questions and thoughts on this. But before we dive into the potential implications of this pardon, let's take a closer look at the legal mechanisms.
That's a great question, and one that legal scholars are hotly debating right now. Those who argue in favor of its legality point to the broad language of the Constitution. They argue that the power to pardon is inherently a sweeping one, not limited to past acts. They might cite historical examples of presidents granting pardons to individuals who hadn't even been charged with a crime yet.
So they're saying that if the president can pardon someone before they've even been accused, surely they can pardon someone for potential future acts.
Exactly. They argue that the president's discretion in this matter is essentially absolute, limited only by the impeachment exception.
But what about those who argue against the legality of a preemptive pardon? What are their main points?
Well, they contend that a preemptive pardon undermines the very purpose of the pardon power, which is to offer clemency after a crime has been committed and due process has been served. They argue that it essentially grants immunity, shielding individuals from the consequences of their actions before those actions have even taken place.
So they see it as a dangerous overreach of presidential power, potentially tilting the scales of justice and undermining the rule of law.
Precisely. They worry that it could create a system where individuals with connections to those in power could be granted a free pass to engage in potentially criminal activities without fear of repercussions.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The idea that presidential pardons could be used to shield individuals from accountability, essentially placing them above the law.
It certainly raises some serious concerns about the potential for abuse and the need for greater transparency and accountability in the exercise of this extraordinary power.
And it's those very concerns that we're going to explore in more depth in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
This situation with the Hunter Biden pardon.
Yeah.
It isn't just a legal puzzle. It's a mirror reflecting some deeply rooted concerns about the state of our justice system.
Yeah.
And its perceived vulnerability to political influence.
Yeah, that's a really profound way to put it. It's like this case has become a lightning rod for all these anxieties. We have about fairness, accountability, and whether the scales of justice are truly balanced.
Exactly. And to understand those anxieties, I think we need to zoom out a bit and consider the broader context of increasing political polarization and its impact on public trust in institutions like the judiciary.
Because ideally, the legal system should be a neutral arbiter, right? A place where facts and evidence prevail regardless of political affiliations or personal connections.
Right.
But it feels like that ideal is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain.
You've hit the nail on the head. The lines between law and politics have become increasingly blurred in recent years. And this has eroded public trust, creating a sense that justice is no longer blind, but rather influenced by partisan agendas.
And that erosion of trust is incredibly dangerous, isn't it? Because if people lose faith in the legal system, they're less likely to cooperate with law enforcement, less likely to respect court decisions, and more likely to resort to extrajudicial means to resolve disputes.
Precisely. It's a slippery slope, and one that we need to be extremely cautious of navigating. When people perceive the legal system as rigged or biased, it undermines the very foundation of our democracy.
So where do we go from here? How do we rebuild that trust and ensure that justice remains impartial and insulated from political pressures?
It's a complex challenge, but I believe it starts with transparency and accountability. We need to demand greater transparency from our elected officials, particularly when it comes to decisions that have legal ramifications like presidential pardons. We need to hold them accountable for their actions and ensure that they're acting in the best interests of the nation, not just their own political party.
That makes sense. But transparency alone isn't enough, is it? We also need to address the underlying issue of political polarization, which seems to be fueling so much of the distrust and division in our society.
Absolutely. We need to find ways to bridge the partisan divide and foster a more civil and respectful public discourse. We need to move away from the us versus them mentality and recognize that we're all in this together. We're all Americans with a shared interest in preserving our democracy and upholding the rule of law.
That's a powerful message. It's a reminder that despite our differences, we share a common bond, a commitment to the principles of justice and equality that underpin our nation. But how do we actually put this into practice? How do we bridge the divide in a society that feels increasingly fractured?
It's not going to be easy. It requires a conscious effort from all of us to engage in constructive dialogue, to listen to perspectives that differ from our own, and to seek common ground wherever possible. We need to promote media literacy and critical thinking skills so that people can discern fact from fiction and make informed decisions based on evidence rather than emotion.
It sounds like we're talking about a cultural shift, a shift away from the echo chambers and filter bubbles that have become so prevalent in the digital age. A shift towards a more nuanced and informed understanding of complex issues.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a culture of intellectual humility, recognizing that none of us have all the answers and that we can learn from each other even when we disagree. It's about fostering a spirit of empathy and understanding, recognizing that behind every viewpoint is a human being with their own unique experiences and perspectives.
It's a tall order, but one that feels absolutely essential if we want to preserve the integrity of our legal system and the very fabric of our democracy. This case of this pardon has really forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the state of our nation.
You're right. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that the ideals we hold dear are not self-sustaining. They require constant vigilance and a commitment from all of us to uphold them.
This conversation has been incredibly insightful. It's given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure our viewers are feeling the same way. But before we wrap up, I want to bring us back to the specific implications of the Hunter Biden pardon for the future of presidential power and the justice system.
It's a crucial point. This pardon, regardless of its legality or the motivations behind it, has undoubtedly set a precedent. It's opened up a Pandora's box of questions about the limits of executive power and the potential for its abuse.
And those questions are going to continue to be debated long after this particular case fades from the headlines.
Absolutely. This is a conversation that's just beginning. And it's one that we as a society need to have with honesty, nuance, and a deep commitment to preserving the principles of justice and the rule of law.
We'll be right back after a quick message from our sponsors. Welcome back to Courtroom Conversations. As we delve deeper into this pardon, I can't help but think about the potential ripple effects. It's like throwing a stone into a pond and watching the waves spread outward.
That's a great analogy because the implications of this pardon extend far beyond Hunter Biden himself. It touches upon fundamental questions about presidential power, legal precedent, and public trust in the justice system.
And those questions are likely to reverberate for years to come, potentially shaping how future presidents wield their pardon power and how the public perceives the fairness and impartiality of our legal system.
Precisely. And one area where we're already seeing these ripples is in the debate over potential pardons related to the January 6th Capitol attack. As you may recall, there's been a lot of speculation that former President Trump might attempt to pardon individuals convicted of crimes related to that event.
And the Hunter Biden pardon, with its unprecedented scope and justification of perceived political persecution, could embolden such actions, providing a sort of legal blueprint for future presidents seeking to shield their allies from accountability.
It's a chilling thought because it suggests that presidential pardons could become increasingly weaponized, used as political tools to undermine the rule of law and obstruct justice.
It's a slippery slope, and one that we as a society need to be extremely wary of. But beyond the specific implications for January 6th related pardons, the Hunter Biden pardon raises broader concerns about the erosion of public trust in the justice system.
You're right. When people see pardons being used in ways that appear to be motivated by political expediency or personal favoritism, it erodes their faith in the fairness and impartiality of the legal system. And that erosion of trust can have far-reaching consequences for our democracy.
Absolutely. Because a functioning democracy relies on the belief that the law applies equally to everyone, regardless of their wealth, their status, or their political connections. If people lose faith in that fundamental principle, it can lead to cynicism, apathy, and even a willingness to take the law into their own hands.
It's a dangerous path and one that we need to avoid at all costs. So how do we safeguard against these risks? How do we ensure that the pardon power is used responsibly and that public trust in the justice system is preserved?
Those are the million-dollar questions. And unfortunately, there are no easy answers. But I think part of the solution lies in greater transparency and accountability. We need to demand more transparency from our elected officials, particularly when it comes to decisions that have legal ramifications like presidential pardons. And we need to hold them accountable for their actions, ensuring that they are acting in the best interests of the nation, not just their own political allies.
I agree. Transparency and accountability are crucial. But we also need to foster a deeper understanding of the legal system and its complexities among the general public. The more people understand about how the law works, the better equipped they will be to recognize potential abuses of power and to hold those in authority accountable.
It's about empowering citizens to be informed and engaged participants in our democracy. And it's about promoting a culture of respect for the rule of law, even when we disagree with particular outcomes.
Well said. Ultimately, the preservation of our democracy and the integrity of our legal system depends on all of us. We need to be vigilant, engaged, and willing to speak out against injustice wherever we see it. We need to demand better from our leaders and from ourselves.
Powerful words. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. This has been a complex and challenging conversation, but I believe it's an essential one. The Hunter Biden pardon has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the state of our nation and the fragility of our institutions. But it has also reminded us of the importance of civic engagement, critical thinking, and a steadfast commitment to the principles of justice and the rule of law.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for guiding us through this intricate legal landscape with your insightful questions and your unwavering commitment to fostering a deeper understanding of these crucial issues.
And thank you for sharing your expertise and your thoughtful analysis. It's been a privilege to have you on Courtroom Conversations. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Classic Courtroom, and leave your comments below. We always appreciate hearing from you. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those courtroom conversations going.